I'll share the text with you and then we will start. So here is the text. And we, in our last class, we had done up to this uh, line number 662. So Satan, he had declared that their uh, plan would be to never to submit to God and always to wage war, either openly or take recourse to some kind of trickery or fraud in order to win against God. So from here, uh, we will be reading from this line number 663, and we will see what uh, the effect of his speech was on the fallen angels. He spake, and to confirm his words, out flew millions of flaming swords drawn from the thighs of mighty cherubim. So here, when Satan uh, declares his resolve to wage eternal war against God, uh, he was supported by the band of fallen angels, and they brought out their flaming swords. They drew their flaming swords, and they uh, there could be seen these innumerable flaming swords that were lighting up the this darkness of hell. So mighty cherubim, of course, refers to the fallen angels. The sudden blaze far round illumined hell. So the blaze of these swords, it illumined hell, and uh, darkness of hell was dispersed. They raged against the highest, and fierce, with grasped arms, clashed on their sounding shields the din of war, hurling defiance toward the vault of heaven. So all these fallen angels, they raged, that is, they were angry against God, and they were holding with fierce grasp the weapons, and these weapons were clashing and making a sound. So uh, we we know that Milton is referring here to the custom of the Roman soldiers, and when they applauded a speech of their general, it was to smite their shields with their swords. So here also the fallen angels are shown as uh, clashing their swords on the shields and making a sound of war, the din of war. And they were hurling defiance. So they were showing their defiance towards heaven, that is the vault of heaven, where the Almighty God uh, was residing. There stood a hill not far, whose grisly top belched fire and rolling smoke. Uh, Now you will remember that these fallen angels, along with Satan and Beelzebub, they were standing on this plain that was, of course, not made of liquid fire like the uh, lake of hell, but it was made of solid fire. And nearby, they could see a hill whose grisly top, grisly here means ugly or frightening, and belched fire and rolling smoke. Belched fire and rolling smoke means that it was uh, sort of kind of erupting. Fire and smoke was coming out from the top of that hill. The rest entire shone with a glossy scarf, undoubted sign that in his womb was hid metallic ore, the work of sulfur. So here Milton is describing this hill in hell, and the other parts of this hill, it was shining with a kind of a glossy kind of a shine. And uh, here the poet says that this was uh, a sign that inside, in his home, means inside that hill, was hidden metallic ore, the work of sulfur. So it was a popular belief in Milton's time that the heat of sulfur converted ordinary earth into metals. So that is what is being uh, said here. So the rest of the hill, scarf means the crust or the outcrop, that is the outside. So here this is the reference to the popular belief during Milton's time. Thither, winged with speed, a numerous brigade hastened, and there these fallen angels, the numerous brigade, here it is this host of fallen angels who they flew there swiftly, as when bands of pioneers with spade and pickaxe armed forerun the royal camp to trench a field or cast a rampart. So here also there is a small simile. The flight of the fallen angels towards this hill is being compared with the bands of pioneers or those uh, workers, the pioneers or the miners who uh, actually they precede uh, the royal army, and they have the duty of the forerun, meaning they move before the royal camp, and they are armed with spades and pickaxes. And what they uh, do, they trench a field. They trench a field means they cut trenches in a field for defensive purposes. So it is the duty of these pioneers to clear the way for the army and construct entrenchments. And here uh, you can look at this word rampart. It means the defensive settlements. And so these bands of pioneers, they have this duty to do. So they clear the way before the royal army comes in. So here the the fallen angels, they also, the band of fallen angels, they also go there first. Mammon led them on. Mammon, the least erected spirit that fell from heaven. So which fallen angel led them on? Who was their leader in this? It was mammon. And here, actually, uh, mammon is a personification of avarice or greed, of material wealth. And this word is used in the New Testament to mean wealth. And Milton here thinks of mammon as the personification of avarice or greed. So it was Mammon, the least erected, means who was the most groveling. Uh, as you know, in case when we read about the angels, we come to know that they have a lofty carriage, upright carriage. They stand erect, and it is the sign of lofty thoughts. While the downcast looks of an angel actually implies baseness. So the ignoble Mammon is described as bending downwards, and he's bending his looks downward. He is not able to look upwards, and his thoughts are likewise uh, base and vile. So he was the least erected spirit that fell from heaven, for even in heaven, his looks and thoughts were always downward bent. So when he was in heaven, when he had not fallen from heaven, even at that time, his looks were bent towards the ground, admiring more the riches of heaven's pavement, trodden gold. So, what did he do in heaven? He was busy admiring the riches of heaven and the golden pavements of heaven. So, the pavements of heaven were made of pure gold, and Mammon was very fond of that gold and those golden pavements. Than aught divine or holy else enjoyed in vision beatific. So vision beatific means the blessed vision. So in Christian theology, this vision was essentially the soul's perception of the goodness of God. So the blessed vision here means the the beatific vision here means the blessed vision, and it means the soul's perception of the goodness of God. And this perception alone could make the soul happy. So Mammon was not concerned with that, and he was kind of not like this. The vision, or the vision that made the other angels happy when they saw God, uh, their minds were filled with joy, was absent in Mammon. By him first, men also, and by his suggestion taught, ransacked the centre, and with impious hands rifled the bowels of their mother earth for treasures better hid. So here Milton is referring to the center, meaning the center of the universe. The how human beings, at his uh, provocation, it was Mammon who led them on by his suggestion taught. They were prompted to look for treasures which were best buried within uh, underneath Mother Earth. Rifled means ransacked. So it would have been better for mankind if gold had remained undiscovered, as it has been the source of so much vice and bloodshed. So that Milton is here criticizing uh, man's, you know, the way men were led by mammon, that is avarice, and Milton is criticizing the people's pursuit of material prosperity at the cost of spiritual development. So, this is the situation as we see here. Soon had his crew opened into the hill a spacious wound and digged out ribs of gold. So, uh, his crew, meaning the followers of Satan, they opened the earth, that is the hill, this hill, not the earth, but this hill, a spacious wound. So it was a big hole, that is, and they were able to dig out ribs of gold, bars of gold. Let none admire that riches grow in hell, that soil may best reserve the precious bane. So here Milton is saying that uh, the phrase precious bane is an example of a figure of speech known as oxymoron, Oxymoron, where two opposite adjectives are placed side by side. Now, the word bane means some kind of a curse or evil thing, while the word precious, of course, is used in a commendatory sense. So, precious ben, meaning this gold is a precious ben in the lives of human beings. It is precious, it is valuable, but it has turned out to be the cause of much strife and unhappiness. So, this precious ben, that is gold, uh, it properly belongs to hell. The soil of that region deserves this uh, precious ben. And here, let those who boast in mortal things and wandering tell of Babel and the works of Memphian kings learn how their greatest monuments of fame. So here, uh, Babel, it might refer to Babylon, and Babylon, which contains some of the greatest architectural works of the ancient world. And here Milton is saying that people who boast in mortal things, material things, the possession of material things, and they talk about Babylon, where uh, it could mean the Tower of Babel also, or Babylon, and there were certain great architectural works. And the works of Memphian kings, Memphian means the pyramids built by the Egyptian pharaohs. Memphian means Egyptian, as you know, Memphian chivalry, which you read in this very book. So Memphis was the chief city of the Egyptians, and the phrase here refers to the pyramids built by the Egyptian kings. And of course, the pyramids were among the nine the wonders of the world. So learn how their greatest monuments of fame means the pyramids, and strength and art are easily outdone by spirits reprobate. So how these spirits, these fallen angels, actually they are condemned. Reprobate means they are rejected by God. They are condemned. And in an hour, what in an age they with incessant toil and hands innumerable scares perform. So all these pyramids in Egypt were built by innumerable laborers who had toiled for long days. But these fallen angels were able to do that uh, that kind of work within an hour. So the strength and art was combined in the pyramids, but they were outdone by these fallen angels. That the poet here wants to say that the greatest works of human grandeur are easily surpassed by the works of these devils, and the far superior work of the devils is completed in 1 hour, while the greatest human works take an age to finish. So this is the point of the comparison between the way the devils were working on this mountaintop and how the Egyptian laborers had uh, made these pyramids by working uh, for a long time. So hands innumerable, uh, of course, refers to the laborers. And in the building of the Great Pyramid, it was estimated that almost more than 366,000 men were kept at work for 20 years to build the Great Pyramid. So this is the description. Nigh on the plain in many cells prepared, that underneath had veins of liquid fire, sluiced from the lake, a second multitude with wondrous art found out the massy ore. So here the building, how they were building up, founded uh, here means that they were actually nigh on the plain in many cells prepared. So they were preparing this this uh, hill, and we can see that on the plain a second group of angels, they were fallen angels, they were preparing many cells beneath which burnt liquid fire brought there from the lake by sluices. Sluices are artificial water channels or sliding gates or other contrivances for regulating the flow of, in this case, liquid fire. So they were bringing in liquid fire from the lake of hell. And as we can see here, a second multitude with wondrous art found out the massy ore, severing each kind, and scummed the bullion dross. And there were another group of fallen angels, and with wonderful art they melted the massive ore, separating each metal, and skimmed the scum or the impurities which rose on the surface of molten gold. So that is bullion dross, that is the scum was separated. Uh, a third as soon had formed within the ground of various mould, and from the boiling cells by strange conveyance filled each hollow nook. So the third group of angels had with equal promptitude, they set up within the ground molds of various kinds and shapes, and filled each hollow recess with the melted gold transported there from the cells by a very wonderful device. And this actually could be compared to this description as in an organ from one blast of wind to many a row of pipes the soundboard breathes. So just as the soundboard of a musical instrument sends one forceful current of wind into a large number of pipes fitted in a long row. So in that way, they were sort of transferring this boiling, uh, the gold. Uh, as in an organ from one blast of wind to many a row of pipes the soundboard breathes. Anon, out of the earth a fabric huge rose like an exhalation, with the sound of dulcet symphonies and voices sweet. Now, soon, anon means soon, that out of this earth a huge structure emerged like a mist, to the sound of sweet musical notes and sweet voices. Dulcet means sweet, and it came out from the from this from under this out of this earth, built like a temple, where pilasters round were set, and Doric pillars overlaid with golden architrave. So this was built like a temple, and it was set with round shaped columns. It had pillars of the Doric style of architecture, and the pillars were overlaid with a golden beam with golden architrave. And here uh, we see that these pillars uh, actually they are being described as Doric pillars. Before a little while before uh, we had read about the Dorian music. Now, so nor did there want cornice or frieze with bossy sculptures graven. So it was a kind of a building, the pilasters, that is the square pillars, and now Doric pillars. Actually, it means the a kind of a Greek architecture. Doric was the oldest and simplest of the styles of Greek architectures, and they are distinguished from the Ionian or the Corinthian pillars by the fact that they have no bases, and by the uh, ornament, they are not ornamental in that sense. And there was no uh, cornice or frieze, so the architrave is surmounted by frieze, and the cornice projects above the frieze. So here, this was the work of these fallen angels, as we can see here. Uh, with bossy sculptures graven, the roof was fretted gold. So the melting of gold was going on, and how we can see the palace was being built here on this hill, and we can see that these pillars were overlaid with a golden beam, and the roof was carved with gold. Not Babylon nor great Al Cairo such magnificence equalled in all their glories, to enshrine Belus or Serapis their gods, or seat their kings. So Milton here says us that neither Babylon nor great Cairo ever attained such splendor in all their glory, even in building temples dedicated to their gods, Belus or Serapis, or in building palaces for their kings. So this was the kind of palace that was being built by these fallen angels. It was far more beautiful or wonderful than what could be found in Babylon or in Cairo, which were built for the kings or for the gods Belus or Serapis. So uh, here we can see that uh, Milton uses Al Cairo, this word, the modern word is Cairo, and However, Al Cairo was a different city which was founded by the Arabians after Memphis was captured. And there was a great temple of Serapis at Memphis. And Belus, who is referred to here, he was an Assyrian sun god, but he was also regarded as the creator of the world. So his temple at Babylon was described by Herodotus, the Greek historian. And uh, Serapis and Belus, they were the gods in honor of whom the temples were built. When Egypt with Assyria strove in wealth and luxury. So Egypt and Assyria, were the standards of comparison for a building. And during the ancient times, they were the places where the finest architecture was to be found. The ascending pile stood fixed her stately height, and straight the doors, opening their brazen folds, discover wide within her ample spaces were the smooth and level pavement. So here is the description of the palace of Satan, which is being built, and it is far more magnificent than what could have been that had been built in Egypt and Assyria. The rising structure now became complete, having reached its full and impressive height, stately height. And at once the doors, opening their brassy leaves, revealed over a wide area within. So the doors, they opened and revealed the ample space, that is the wide area, large spaces on the smooth and level pavement. From the arched roof, pendant by subtle magic, many a row of starry lamps and blazing cressets, fed with naphtha and asphaltus, yielded light as from a sky. So here could be seen that from the arched roof, many rows of star-like lamps and bright fire baskets hung as if by some mysterious magic. And these lamps were lit up with naphtha and asphaltus. So they were like this building was like the sky, and lamps were like the stars, and their light fell as if from the sky. So the description of the uh, you know how pandemonium, this is the name of the palace of hell, Satan's palace. Cressets means hanging lamps in the form of metal baskets filled with fire. So there were these hanging lamps, and which were uh, being lit up by these naphtha and asphaltus. The hasty multitude, admiring, entered, and the work some praise and some the architect. So the hasty multitude, meaning these fallen angels, they quickly entered and they admired the work of the architecture of Mammon. His hand was known in heaven by many a towered structure high. So in heaven, uh, he was known to have been a skillful architect, having built a number of high buildings having towers, where sceptered angels held their residence and sat as princes, whom the Supreme King exalted to such power and gave to rule, each in his hierarchy. So here there is the description of how the angels were sitting there. They are holding their rods of authority. They dwelt there and they sat like princes whom the supreme ruler God had raised to such power and to each of whom he had given the authority to rule according to his status and rank. So the hierarchy here means according to the status and rank of the angels. So a particular category, a class of angels, they had different powers which was given to them by God. Sceptered means the royal rods that they held. The orders bright, so they had their categories, different ranks. Nor was his name unheard or unadored in ancient Greece. And in Ozonian land, men called him Malsiba. So this was the architect Malsiba. And Milton says that uh, the name of this architect was also well known and much respected in ancient Greece. And in Italy, he was known by the name of Malsiba. Malsiba means the softener or welder. So here, this building has been built by Malsiba. Uh, Milton identifies Malsiba with Mammon. Malsiba, how he was known also in Greece and in the Ozonian land, means in Italy, and how he fell from heaven, they fabled, thrown by angry Jove, sheer over the crystal battlements, and how he was thrown from uh, thrown over the bright walls by the king of gods, angry Jupiter. From morn to noon he fell, from noon to dewy eve, a summer's day. So his fall also took place for a long time. And with the setting sun, dropped from the zenith like a falling star on Lemnos, the Aegean isle. So ultimately, he kept falling from morning to noon and from noon to dewy evening for the whole of a summer's day. And with the setting sun, he alighted from the height like a falling star on the island of Lemnos in the Aegean Sea. Thus they relate, adding. So Milton says that this is the story, but it is a mistake, because for he with this rebellious rout fell long before, nor aught availed him now to have built in heaven high towers. But the real fact is that he, with this rebellious group of fallen angels, had fallen from heaven long before that. Nor was it of any use to him now that he had erected buildings with high towers in heaven. So he had to live in hell now. Nor did he escape by all his engines, but was headlong sent with his industrious crew to build in hell. So, though he was a skillful architect, he could not escape his present fate in spite of all his contrivances. But he was thrown headlong with his hard-working companions to build a palace for Satan and his followers in hell. So his skill in architecture did not save him. Meanwhile, the winged heralds, by command of sovereign power, with awful ceremony and trumpet sound, throughout the host proclaim a solemn council forthwith to be held at Pandemonium. So, as we now see, that the winged messengers, under the orders of the supreme power of Satan, they make an announcement to the blowing of the trumpet and with stern ceremony, and they inform the entire force of fallen angels that a solemn meeting, council would be held immediately at Pandemonium. And so the Pandemonium, this is the building, palace, which was going to be the new home of the fallen angels, the high capital of Satan and his peers. So it was going to be their capital. Their summons called from every band and squared regiment by place or choice the worthiest. So when this announcement was made in response to this call, the most meritorious leaders, either by virtue of their rank or through a kind of a selection process, they appeared from every squadron and every regiment drawn up in a square. So they came up, they anon with hundreds and with thousands trooping came, attended. So they assembled before Satan. All access was thronged, the gates and porches wide. So all the approaches to pandemonium were crowded, and all the gates and the wide porches were crowded also. But chief, the spacious hall, though like a covered field, where champions bold won't ride in armed, and at the Soldan's chair defied the best of Paynim chivalry. So here Milton is again referring to how the fallen angels were uh, large, they were very innumerable in number. So actually the commodious hall was the place where the multitude of fallen angels had assembled in large numbers. And this hall could be compared to a field which was enclosed with lists for tournaments, where the bold combatants were accustomed to ride in arms and where in front of the Sultan's seat, Sultan here means Sultan's seat, the three were challenged at the most gallant of the pagan soldiers to fight to death or face them with lance in brief encounters. Paynim chivalry. So Paynim, as you know, the choicest soldiers, to mortal combat or career with lance. Thick swan, both on the ground and in the air, brushed with the hiss of rustling wings. So there was, uh, there could be seen that this thick crowd of fallen angels, both on the ground and in the air, against which they moved with rustling wings, producing a kind of a hissing sound. As bees in springtime, here is another epic simile. When the sun with Taurus rides, pour forth their populous youth about the hive in clusters. So here, the simile is about the bees in springtime. When the sun enters that part of the sky which is dominated by the constellation of Taurus, and pour forth their numerous young ones in clusters about the hive. So the young bees, they are buzzing around the hives. So the comparison is to the bees. Uh, Pour forth their populous youth about the hive in clusters. They among fresh dews and flowers fly to and fro, or on the smoothed plank. So they fly to and fro among the fresh dews and flowers, or they move about and discuss their state of affairs on the smooth plank, the suburb of their straw-built citadel. So the suburb of their straw-built citadel means the outlying part of their straw-built fortress, namely their hive. So this is the description of the beehive and the bees. New rubbed with balm, expatiate and confer their state affairs. So they are the bees, as they hold a kind of a meeting, as it were. They confer and they have a meeting outside their hive. They buzz around. Likewise, the fallen angels, they were buzzing around like bees. So thick the airy crowd swarmed and were straightened. So like this way, the fallen angels, they uh, were moving about. The multitude of angels having airy forms assembled there and were pressed together. Till the signal given, behold the wonder, they but now who seemed in bigness to surpass art's giant sons, now less than smallest dwarfs, in narrow room throng numberless. So here Milton is saying that the angels who had they were really huge in stature, and they were, of course, they would not have been able to go inside the palace, or that is all of them, but a signal was given and a wonderful thing happened. And this was that the angels who a moment ago had seemed to be larger even than the giant offspring of earth now looked smaller than the smallest dwarfs, and they crowded the narrow space with their countless numbers. So they became very small in bigness to surpass Earth's giant suns, that is the Titans, now less than smallest dwarfs in narrow room throng numberless, like that pygmean race beyond the Indian mount, or fairy elves whose midnight revels by a forest side or fountain some belated peasant sees or dreams he sees. So here Milton refers to the race of pygmies who were believed to dwell beyond the Indian Mount. And Indian Mount, of course, we all know what is the Indian Mount. That is, of course, the Himalayas. So Milton here refers to this the Pygmean race beyond the Indian Mount, that is to our country, India. So actually, this was a kind of a wrong conception, because India, during those times, during Milton's time, was a very mysterious country, and all kinds of stories were floated, and it was believed that a race of pygmies, they lived in India beyond the Himalayas. So the point of the comparison is that the fallen angels who were uh, sometime earlier, they were like titans, very big, gigantic. They compressed themselves. They became like pygmies. Or fairy elves, whose midnight revels by a forest side or fountain, some belated peasant sees or dreams he sees. Or they could be compared to some of those delicate elfish creatures, like the fairy elves, who are seen actually or in his imagination by a belated peasant who is returning home at night, while the overhead the moon is shining palely as a kind of a witness, and while overhead the moon sits arbitress, and nearer to the earth wheels her pale course, they on their mirth and dance intent, with jocund music charm his ear. So the moon is shining, and the peasant, uh, uh, they, he is able to see the spells of the fairies, and they, in their mirth, the fairies are concentrating on their dancing and merrymaking, delighting the peasants' ears with their gay music. So the moon sits arbitress near to the earth, and the fairies are dancing. Jocund music, joyful music. At once with joy and fear his heart rebounds. The peasant is, of course, he is uh, somewhat, he is joyful to hear the sound of the music, and the heart of the peasant beats far faster with a kind of a fear also when he sees these uh, creatures. Thus, incorporeal spirits to smallest forms reduced their shapes immense, and were at large, though without number still, amidst the hall of that infernal court. So likewise, this is the simile, those insubstantial or airy spirits, they reduced their huge figures to the smallest possible size. And in this way, they were able to find ample room, even though they were still numberless, in the hall of that palace in hell. So this is the point of the comparison: the bees, the pygmies, the elves, the fairies, like that. But far within and in their own dimensions, like themselves, the great seraphic lords and cherubim in close recess and secret conclave sat. So inside that hall, the great seraphic lords and the cherubims, they were retaining their own gigantic figures. They sat in a retired place to hold a secret meeting. Secret conclave means secret meeting. 1,000 demigods on golden seats, frequent and full. So they were like demigods. They were sitting on golden seats, numerous, and in their full strength. After short silence, then, and summons read, the great consult began. So after the summons, after a brief silence, and after the summons had been read, the momentous deliberation began. So as we can see, this is the end of the first book. This is uh, the end of our reading of Paradise Lost, book one. And I hope that you have enjoyed reading this tremendous text. And this text is really something that is one of the greatest texts in English literature. And John Milton is justly commemorated for this text. So we have read only the first book. It is there in your syllabus. Uh, and there are 11 other books. It's in 12 books, really. It's a wonderful text. If you get the time, if you have the inclination, I would ask you to read the whole of this text later on. Not now, of course, later on when you get time, when you become a bit older. If you have enjoyed reading this text like me. So I would uh, stop here today.